I'm down with that.
All right. Well, welcome back. We are going to talk about the 5 things that you don't want to do when you're RVing, right?
Right.
Did I read that right? It wasn't the 5 things you want to do?
Yeah, the 5 things you don't want to do, shouldn't do in the RV. And I had to, narrow it down to, 5.
There's so many things.
Right?
Matter of fact, in the comments, why don't you put down your top whatever amount of things that you think you shouldn't do in an RV, and it could be as crazy as you want. Just get
bull riding.
Yeah, definitely not one of the things you want to do.
Yeah,
skeet shooting. That's true. You were talking about lifting weights, but you got the little bungee things. But it's talking about like dead weight. Yeah. So the first thing you talked about was traveling with the propane on. Now this is a controversial topic because everybody says, I do it all the time. I've been doing it for years, and there's nothing wrong with it.
And I think, for me, it's settled science, but I get it that people still
pseudoscience.
It's settled science. Ship blows up, right? So don't be driving down the road with the propane on. We deal with a lot of influencers that it's kind of funny because they still won't touch that. It's like the third rail, which I don't understand why. I guess because you get a lot of pushback on that. But here's the thing: the reason why you shouldn't. First and foremost, yes, I get people all the time that will say, "Hey, it is not illegal to drive down the road with your propane on." Actually, the DOT actually puts out 2 things out there when it comes to driving down the road with your propane on. One, you shouldn't have your propane on, which means no flame or anything else, when pulling into a fuel station. Need I say more? You got an open flame, you're going into a fuel station. So the question is, for those of you that are hardcore loyalists, like I've always driven, knowing you're driving down the road with your propane on, when you pull into a fuel station, do you stop short and turn it off, right? Because you can't tell me when that flame is on or off. But number 2, of course, is tunnels. Now, each state may be a little bit different as well. They may add to what the DOT has. Like in their jurisdiction, they're also going to add certain things. But here's the thing. When you have your propane on, aside from your propane generator, because really that's no different than your engine, the combustion takes place inside the engine. But when it comes to our appliances, the combustion takes place outside the engine, and it needs air. Well, if it's outside, whether it's going to be your water heater, furnace, refrigerator, which is the biggest culprit, that's an open flame on the outside. You're driving down the road. Of course, you got a pressure situation. You got air pressure on the outside, air pressure on the inside. There's a difference between the two, and we pull that flame out.
So that happened to me on my water heater. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember you calling me.
I opened up my water heater, and I noticed all my wires near where the flame is were just
charred
crispy.
White. Yeah.
And I was like, what is going on? And Todd's like, do you drive with the propane on? I'm like, yes, because it's legal.
Yeah.
And he goes, you need to stop that.
Well, and it was propane only in the class.
Mine was propane only. Yep.
Which drove me crazy.
How do you think I felt?
Right. If you're paying for your site, you're paying for your electricity. Use electricity, not propane. Save some dollars. Yeah.
Or both. You want to get it nice up to temperature quick.
Yes.
So
speaking back to that, driving down the road with your propane on, it's those those appliances where we have the combustion taking place outside. It's not necessarily, you do have that where you're kind of, burning up the appliances, but I could tell you, say with the refrigerator, right? It goes through a flue tube. There is a spiral baffle inside. The whole purpose of that spiral baffle is to heat that tube up evenly, right? Because there's welds and anything else. And if you pull that flame just on the periphery, that spiral baffle is no longer even effective. The flame's going up the outside. Well, if that's the case, one side of the pipe heats up, the other side doesn't. One side flexes more than the other. And if there's any type of welds or anything else, that's where we create a weak point. Well, Murphy's Law, right? It may not be while you're traveling down the road, because I think that's where the disconnect is. A ton of people will think, well, there's not, if traveling down the road, their propane on was super bad, we'd have tons and tons and tons of RV fires on the side of the road. It's really not how that happens, right? It's going to be over time, we're wearing down those coils, creating weak points. Murphy's Law states that they typically go out when you're going to sleep, right? And so we don't really associate the reason why there was a fire or a failure to the refrigerator was due to traveling down the road with the propane on, or having any type of wind pull that flame out, we just assume it was a bad refrigerator built by XYZ company, right? But I can tell you a lot of them with the coils. I mean, it's not that amount of heat. I mean, there's just flex going on, but inside those coils, you also have hydrogen, and we know that hydrogen is flammable, right? So it's one of those things where if there was a pressure release because the coils were, in some way messed up because of the improper heat being applied to them because the flame was out of sorts, then yeah, there's a potentiality of that hydrogen mixing with the flame. Boom.
So let's just, it's as simple as it's just not worth it.
Yeah.
Why find out? I've been doing it for 3 years. Great.
I'm going to buck the system. I get that.
Yeah. I mean, ever since my water heater almost went up in flames, I never drove with the propane on. Now, my refrigerator was fine. We would travel all day sometimes because we were going from city to city, every week.
Yeah.
And it was fine. We'd plug back in, or, when we eventually got a solar system and a battery system that would actually allow me to run it on 12 volts instead, that was a game changer.
Yeah.
It was just not worth it. What if something did happen and sliced the propane line? Now there is, some safety measures in the propane tank itself.
Yeah, a little bit.
But, you still have a open flame while you're, God forbid, passed out in the driver's seat because this big accident you were in. It could start a fire, and that's the last thing you want.
And I'll tell you, and a lot of people don't know this, but propane combusts at a far higher temperature. I mean, it instantly hits 1,500 degrees as soon as it combusts. That is totally different than fuel or gas.
It's great for searing steaks, pork chops.
And adding no flavor, right?
No flavor. Well, you got that oil flavor, the propane oil flavor.
Yeah, you do get that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is it's not like, if you throw diesel fuel on a flame, you can see it slowly grow. Gasoline a little bit faster, but propane, boom, 1,500 degrees like that.
Yeah.
And totally right. Another thing is that those lines are pressurized, traveling down. And let's say you've got a slide out kitchen in your slide out, right? Can't use black pipe there. You have to use just your rubber hose.
Yeah.
Man, that happens to be right over the axles. All you need is some sort of tire separation with those steel-belted radial tires.
It seems wrong.
Yeah.
But what are you going to use?
Right. Well, in other words, choose to do what it says, which is don't drive down the road with your propane on.
There you go. All right. So that, I feel, is settled.
Yeah. It's settled science.
Settled. Pseudoscience.
Doesn't mean that you have a different opinion, and I totally get it, that if you're driving down the road with propane on, doesn't mean that we can't communicate.
Let's hear your comment below. Yeah. Let's see. If you believe that you should turn it off, just write turn off in the comments. If you think that it's okay, put reckless in the comments. We will like your comment. There we go.
Turn off and reckless. I like that.
All right. Number 2, leaving your sewer open. Great. Okay. Sewer open.
Yeah.
Gray tanks. Go.
Both are black and
so
gray tanks.
Jason, our video guy.
Yeah.
Beautiful handwriting. You just can't understand a word he says.
That's actually my handwriting, by the way.
Beautiful handwriting. It's like Sanskrit. Very nice, Todd.
You know how many years it's been since I really had to write, since the invention of the Mac?
The typewriter.
Yeah. Although I did take typing in high school.
Did you?
Yeah, with typewriters. They were electric, though.
I had to take it, yeah. It was a requirement. We read books and we did cursive.
I got up to 45 words per minute back then.
Back
in the day, did you ever do speed tests?
Yeah, there was a game that you used to play.
Yeah.
It was like a guy on a horse, and you would type and
we
jump
didn't get
things and stuff. Yeah. All right, so leaving your sewer open. Now, I assume you're talking about the gray water.
Actually, it's both, right? Because we have a lot of people.
Man, if you're leaving your sewer, your black tank open, you're going to be in for a little surprise.
Shit's about to get real.
Yeah, real tall. You're going to flush the toilet and look and see all of your work right there.
Well, and we, working with the government, we had to, kind of tell them why, because whenever we would set those up for, disaster relief or whatnot, they would cut the nipples off and they would just pipe in, a 4-inch or 3.5-inch, depending on,
they just
PVC, and just run it in there. And we're like, there's a tank there. They're like, well, why is there a tank? Wow. So, typically we know that, you definitely don't open up the black tank, and for proper usage, best usage is to, get it as high as you can or filled up as high as you can before you can no longer stand the smell. Then dump it. Yeah. But the gray tank, a lot of people.
Before we move to the black tank, there is a situation, and now we are doing a video on black tank treatment because there's a lot of conspiracy going on about do you need it?
Opinions, yeah.
A lot of different opinions, yeah. I had a situation where I had my black tank, it seemed to be running fine. We were using it, and the next thing I know, it wouldn't flush. And you press the pedal down, you look down, and you see all of your business just sitting there going like, I ain't going anywhere. So what was happening was I had a leak, a very small leak in my black tank.
Oh, boy.
And so what was happening was we'd use it, and then all the water would disappear. It would just drip into the ground. And we boondocked a lot, so you didn't really notice.
I was about to say, you wouldn't notice that?
Yeah, you didn't. If you were on concrete, you'd notice the nice brown spots. But and over time, it just built up and built up and built up. And the other thing is I wasn't using any kind of treatment. I was 3 years full-time on the road. I don't need any of this stuff.
Right.
And it didn't break down fast enough. It didn't break down because there wasn't enough water there to last long enough. And so that was a big mistake. So that's a little teaser for another video we're going to be doing soon about black tank treatment. We're going to have some guests on.
Kind of a dry topic.
Yep. Very dry.
All right.
Wet.
So moving over to the gray tank.
Yes.
Always seems to be a question because I think it's more of a matter of convenience, that, hey, well, if I leave it open, then I never have to worry about anything. Yes, you do. There's a lot of buildup in that gray tank. You wash your dishes. You got, of course, the oils and the fats. Use hot water to break those going down the sink. And what do they do whenever they get in that gray tank? Well, they recoagulate. You have food particles, if you're washing all of that. But every time you go somewhere else, you're getting different minerals in the water. Well, all that begins to build up as well. I mean, one of those is we actually call struvite, and that's that hard shell that begins to build up. And if we let that dry out, it makes it even harder. Everything else, our sensors are off. We get the smell, and I can tell you that it's, the gray tank, the offensive odor coming from the gray tank is just as bad, if not worse, than, of course, the black tank. And so, again, with that, where we're going with this is the best thing to do is to keep that gate valve closed until you're ready to dump. The only caveat there may be is for those of us that may have a washing machine inside. Depending on the size of the tank, there's no way you can get through a cycle because it's just going to rush that water out. You don't want to do that. But open it up while you're washing your clothes, right? Because it's going to rush that water out anyway. So other than that, same thing. It's just there's a disconnect that there's a lot of stuff in the gray tank. And if we let that dry out, it just becomes particles as well. And it will actually just begin to close. And we don't want it in the valve. So keeping some water in there will definitely help out and keep it hydrated. And hopefully even the bacteria inside the holding tank will take care of that as well.
Yeah, and another good benefit of having your gray tank full is when you do finally do that final dump before you take off, you dump your black tank, let that clear out, maybe flush it for a little while, and then you dump your gray tank, and that cleans out your stinky slinky. The last thing you want is to dump your black tank and then have nothing in your gray tank and be like, well, okay, I'm gonna put this together and slide it back in my storage. You want to, it's nice to
leave that as a gift.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice to have that to clean out your slinky. So
yeah. And of course, before you leave, I would say I'm a big proponent in not filling up your tanks going down the road because that can put too much stress on what's holding those tanks up. Now, no Class A's may be a little bit different, where it may be sitting on a subfloor, but for most of us in a towable, it's precariously held up there.
You remember that guy that was leaving here?
Yeah, I was only doing about 25 miles an hour.
Bloop. Well, no, I mean he was in the park.
Yeah.
and he went over a little bump, and then the entire fresh tank just dropped out of the bottom of his trailer.
Drug it for a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, and this was like, let's see, it would have been 7 days after you told him not to do that in class.
Yeah.
It was pretty impressive.
Oh, people do that. I tell them to, fill up their holding tank and use their water pump. They still don't do that. We cut water off. It's just
I'm out of water. It's like, why isn't your fresh tank filled? That's another good tip.
Yeah.
Man, we could just go on and on and on, but we're not.
Right. But what I was getting at is to have a little bit of water in there even when you travel, right? Put in, especially in your black tank. It is a habit for us to totally dump out and leave it dumped out. But when you close it back up, add at least 5 gallons. I know some people will say 3.
Yeah.
Your holding tank is way bigger than that. And
you get that.
Have a couple inches of water.
Empty anxiety. It's like, I need it as empty as possible to last as long as I can.
No.
Yeah.
And that'll help with a little slushy going down a little bit, and that'll help break down some of the stuff as well.
Did you mention ice in this tech tip that we put out?
No.
Why not?
Well, all right. I know some people, swear by it, and I think it's dumb luck. The concept is you put in ice, and ice is physical, right? And if you get it just right, it's going to scrub the bottom. You're traveling down the road, you're bumping and everything else. That ice is going to scrub the bottom of your black tank and help loosen some of the solids. The problem is most of our black tanks are not even on the bottom. They're actually at a slope because naturally we want all the stuff to go downhill. So when you put in the ice, where do you think it goes? Down here, right? So it just kind of cleans up this area here. But most of the time our toilet is up on the high side. This is where stuff gets dropped, right? It doesn't have fins or anything else, so it typically doesn't swim. So the thought is you have to have just enough ice and just enough water so that the ice can move on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And no one knows how much water they have in their holding tank, right? So it's dumb luck. And I get it. People will just throw a bag in there, and I'm sure there's some validity to it. And others are like, it did nothing, right? So for the people that do it, totally fine.
Great.
I think you're just wasting some good margarita mix or whatever by doing that.
Just looking drunk out on the highway,
right?
Swerving
that's
back
the next
and
thing.
forth.
They got to swerve it around and everything else. So,
or just take I-10. Take I-10 and you'll be fine. That'll swish everything around.
Right. Not even my leftover ice. I keep it in there.
Yep. All right. So the next thing we talked about was awnings, leaving them open while you're away. I think this is kind of a no-brainer.
Right.
Now, a lot of rigs have
tons of people do it.
Automatic return awnings, which is great. Ours had that, and what's funny is ours, it would automatically come in, but by that point it was probably already too late. I have a video. I was flying my drone. We were in Table Mesa in Phoenix, and a dust devil came by.
Right.
And it just yanked my awning up, and you can see it, slowly coming in like, woo, with no urgency whatsoever, and the freaking fabric's being yanked up into the sky by this dust devil, and I'm just sitting there with my drone like, I probably should have put that in earlier because it was windy, but I had the automatic thing, so I was safe.
Trusting an automatic sensor is like, trusting a fart while you're, carnivore.
Carnivore diet.
It's just something you don't do.
Leave a comment below if you're on the carnivore diet. Know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. BB shooter or something. All right, so here's the thing. Wind can gust and it can just hit suddenly. Well, and that's just a big kite. Right. So I can tell you, and, some people are more liberal with it than others when it comes to how often they have it out. And ours is more for show, right? Because we never had ours break or anything else. But we use it limited times when the air is still, or if we're going to be there the whole time and we're just trying to get the sunlight off the side. It is not a wind break. It is not a rain break. Right? Because another thing you don't want to do is put that damn thing up wet. It's going to come out all molded and everything else, right? Now, get it. Sometimes there's freak storms, right? There's nothing you can do. But I would recommend on that, opening it up and letting it dry out as quickly as possible. We don't let it sit up there for a couple of weeks. But no, rule of thumb is look around. What are our other RVers doing? The more avid RVers probably don't have their awning out as much, the tie downs or something like that. On your big motor coaches, that definitely helps out. But I think also lowering the arms down makes it harder for the wind to get up underneath there. And a lot of times when they come straight out. Well, that's just, it's a failure waiting to happen. Get it to where it's kind of set. They call it like the rain setting. Now, granted, I tell you, I don't use it for rain, but bring that down. It makes it harder for the air to get up underneath there. So,
but it does make it easier for you to hit your head on it.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, I've got scars from it. Usually not the awning, though. It's the daggum arms.
The arms, yeah. Unless you got those.
I should know.
Unless you got the arms that just come straight out.
Yeah.
Let's see. Disconnecting with appliances on. So that's the next topic.
So we're talking electrical. We're going to swing back on electrical, right? Yep. It's been a while since we talked about this, and it's amazing how I still get this question, and that is
disconnecting from the pedestal with appliances on.
With the appliances on, and we're talking the large appliances. TV, no big deal. We're talking air conditioner, refrigerator, any large demand appliance, because those electrons are flowing through there. And when you disconnect, you break it, and it doesn't break perfectly, right? So whenever you break that connection by pulling out your power cord, for that brief second, there's still electrons trying to run through that cord right there. And as we begin to pull out that cord, we're losing our contact space. Well, that'll eventually hit an appliance or whatever else and really rock it, because we're pulling away as it's still trying to draw from. It's like sucking on a straw and pulling it out of the cup. You'll see, you're going to get more air and everything else. Well, that's going to mess stuff up. Not only that, but it's going to burn up the ends over time. It's going to burn up your cord. It's going to burn up the pedestal. So, it's just a good rule of thumb to always have your large demand appliances off, in the off position whenever connecting or disconnecting, right? Because it's the same for both.
Sure. Well, that makes sense. So in the comments, if you have done that before, I guess.
Right. Show us your failures.
Show us the,
this was my new cord.
Yeah, this is my new cord. But we never, we were probably the worst RVers out there. We never really just cared.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you're there to RV. You're there to have fun.
But it was our house. We lived in it.
Yeah.
So we probably should have taken a little more care. But we didn't think about, the AC was running. We wanted to run as long as possible. So there were times we'd start the generator before I unhooked.
Yeah.
And then, we'd hit the breaker, unhook. And then, because we couldn't do without
make that automatic transfer switch do it for you, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
And that still burns up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think the reason why I still stick with air conditioners is because you have to turn it off at the thermostat. It may be that either whenever you connected or disconnected, the thermostat was satisfied, so therefore it wasn't calling for power. So the next time you either connect or disconnect, right, or plug back in. Let's say you're connecting.
You'll instantly call
that thermostat's still sitting there and says, wait a minute, it's freaking hot now. Let's get that air conditioner on. So as soon as you begin, you just get one leg in there or whatnot, one probe in there, boom, it's going to start sucking power.
This next one, so leave without performing a good check.
Yeah.
We were in... where were we? I guess it doesn't matter.
So we're talking about walking around the RV, making sure everything works before you leave.
But we were caravanning with friends of ours. Andrew, you remember them? And
Pull,
yep. And so they all were going ahead, John and Jedlow. They were going ahead, and I was like, all right, everybody, let's go. And I slammed it in drive, and then when I put it in drive, the automatic... lift started on the stability jacks, but it wasn't enough time for them to come up. So when I put it in drive, they started coming up, and then I just dragged them across the ground, and we all kind of just fell forward. It was great. It was a good experience, but I was focused on the caravan, hey, this is fun. And I didn't do my normal walk around check and didn't do my normal thing because I got distracted.
Yeah, and I think there's an unwritten rule that we always talk about and teach as well, and that is when someone's either setting up or tearing down, don't bother them. Yeah, that's just unwritten, and it totally makes sense because we all have our jive, the way we do things. Someone comes up and starts talking to us or even helps us out. That throws us off, and then we'll end up forgetting something. But yeah, doing a good walk around, that's the best time, right? When it comes to your tires, it says to check them cold. And I get this all the time. Well, so if it's hot, in other words, if I've already been driving, how do I check them? Well, you could check them, but it's going to be, it's not like it's a specific science, hey, add 10% or subtract 10%. Right. But I'm always walk around no matter what. I mean, and just learn from the pros, whether they're, 18-wheelers or whatnot. Those guys walk around that thing, make sure all the contacts, all the connections are good, 7-pin connector, whatever there may be. But that's your opportunity to look at your tires visually. Don't just rely on your TPMS. But visually walk around your tires, actually look at them. But I would also say if, for the love of God, plug it in and check all your appliances. I know a lot of times we assume, well, I put it up and everything was working. We went through winter, come back out. Now half the stuff works, half of it doesn't. It's weird. Stuff breaks down even while you're not using it, right? And it could be just simply something is, set in the wrong position or whatever. But for me, if you can, I would always recommend, performing a complete diagnostic, test on all of your appliances before you pull out.
Absolutely. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the bottom of this video here. And
we'll shortage of comments, I'm sure.
Yeah, and we'll actually respond to them on this channel. Same thing with the other channel. If you have comments there, we'll go ahead and respond to them on this channel. But go ahead and share it with your friends. Let them know this is something new we're doing, and we're really excited about it. And you got anything to close this one out?
No, I think we're glad to have you here. That's all I've got. Hey, really glad you're here.
And there's your tech tip.
There's your tech tip. Bam.